Everyone, thank you very much for waiting. So we would like to begin the Spain floating offshore wind webinar. My name is Uchida from the Economic and Commercial Office of Spain in Japan. I'll be the moderator for today's session. We have invited the speaker from Japan Wind Power Association, Mr. Ueda, as a lecturer, and also he will be supporting the Q&A session. Today's webinar, similar to the last webinar, we have more than 400 participants who had already registered for this webinar. This is another sign of the growing interest in offshore wind power. As you know, this webinar, Spain is already known as a country that has largely introduced renewable energy. And in fact, the energy situation in Spain is very similar to that of Japan. For example, Spain is highly dependent on fossil fuel input, almost 100%, and also it lacks international interconnection capacity for electricity transmission. And the topography of the country makes it more suitable for floating wind farms, which are set to be the last resort for decarbonization, and then for the land-based wind farms. So next year, 2023, in Spain, they are scheduling to make tender. And we are going to explain the details for its installation in today's webinar. So we'd like to begin today's webinar. And after each lecture's presentation, we will open the floor for the Q&A session. You see the Q&A icon at the bottom of this screen. So please participate actively. Without further ado, let me introduce the first speaker. The Agency for Natural Resources, METI, Deputy Director, Mr. Muto, is the first speaker. Mr. Muto, when you are ready, please start your presentation.
Hello, everyone. This is Muto speaking. Can you hear me clearly? Yes, we can hear you clearly. Thank you very much. Now sharing my screen. So do you see my screen now? Yes, I can see that. Now I would like to begin my presentation. Hello, everyone. Once again, my name is Keisuke Uto, the Deputy Director of the Energy Efficiency Renewable Energy Department at METI. So I'm now in charge of the renewable energy department, especially among the energy sector. I'm acting as the Deputy Director in this agency. And most recently, there is the emerging the trend in the offshore wind in Japan. So we would like to talk about that Japanese, the offshore wind policy introduction and the current status. Thank you very much. Please take a look at this page. First of all, this is an overview of the Japanese energy strategy. So 2021 in December, there was the in October, there was the cabinet approval of the sixth energy strategic plan, which says that by 2030, the renewable energy contribution should increase to 36 to 38%. So this is a very aggressive target, and this was announced in the strategic plan. So as we here see the reliance on the thermal power, but we have a very aspirational target of the renewable energy use, and of which the wind power share should be 5% of the total renewable energy. So right now we have a 0.7%, but this is a very aggressive target to improve that ratio to 5%. For this, so we need to increase the contribution from the wind power. We are now believing that the offshore wind power generation will be the key element to have this target to be achieved. Now, for this offshore wind power, in order to increase this contribution, December 2020, there was the we crafted the Japan's vision for offshore wind power industry. This was the joint work together with the government as well as the private sector. As the target by the government, by 2030, for both, fixed bottom as well as the floating type, we would like to achieve the 10 gigawatts by 2030, and then by 2040, want to achieve 30 to 45 gigawatts. That's the introduction target. By so doing, in Japan, we would like to create the market for offshore wind power. This is a commitment from the Japanese government. Again, on the other hand, the targets by industry is set. Also, to reduce the cost of the offshore wind power by 2030 to 2035, we'd like to achieve the 8 to 9 yen per kilowatt per hour. So to achieve that, we would like to improve or expand this offshore wind power industry. To this end, we have been working on the Offshore Wind Promotion Act, was enacted in April 2019. Based on this, the government's initiative to create new market for offshore wind power, and also the industry will have the designated area to have the operations. And the selection of the operator will be done through the auction and tender process. In 2021, last December, there was a so-called round one auction was finalized, and there was the 3 sea areas, so a total of 1.7 gigawatts. All 3 areas were successfully auctioned by Mitsubishi and other consortiums. And already we have 7 promising zones on the pipeline, and also there are 10 preparation zones as well. Therefore, we will be seeing the more series of the rounds to come. As I mentioned, for this round 1 auction result, so first of all, to have this auctions, the government has indicated the limits of the per kilowatts, and 27 yen, 29 yen was set as the government initiative, 29 yen per kilowatts hour. But it was the 36 yen at the moment. So the industry-wise, it was a really big challenge to achieve the 29 yen. However, as a result, 27 yen, sorry, not 29, but the 27, it was a really aggressive target. However, as you can see the results, the auction result was very aspirational, and a very low cost was indicated. Therefore, it was a really good indication for the futures rounds as well. And of course, the cost is not the only element to determine in terms of the offshore wind promotion. the sea areas will be dominated for the long period of time. Therefore, it's very essential to have a good collaboration with the local team or participants and residents, as well as fishery industry, and have the good project operations itself. That feasibility is very essential to determine the result. But still, we believe that this round one action was very successful. Now, continue to talk about this public tender systems. As a result of this round one, we believe that there are some necessary areas for improvement, because the round one was the first in kind to have this public auctions. Based on this result, we would like to adopt some changes or some revisions. There are 4 main points for this change. After the result of the round one, the number 1, continue to focus on the price in points. This time, Mitsubishi and other consortium group also provided a very aggressive price. But compared to European markets, the price offer was not too aggressive enough. Therefore, we appreciate the industry efforts to continue to focus on the reduction of the cost and price. Number 2. So the timing of the start of the offshore wind power operations, this has to have the more key focus. Because at the early stage of the offshore wind industry or market creation, it is essential to have the early adoption and early launch of the such a project. This is very essential for the future projects to come. Therefore, you need to assess better on the timing of the start of the projects. And of course, it's not just the launch or the start of the project, but the more stable operation is very essential. By having that, we will be able to have a good buy-in from the Japanese public and also the local people. Therefore, not just the early timing, but also the stable operation is very essential. So we would like to assess such a not just the early timing of the launch, but also the stable operation scheme. And number 3 is that we need to we need to listen to the voice of the local community more carefully and reflect their opinions. Needed to have a more assessment on the impact on the local community as well as the fishery industry and national government as well as the local municipalities may not fully capturing the voice of the local people. That was the kind of feedback from this round one. Therefore, we would like to adopt a system where we can have a more voice to be heard for the local people.
The first point is to allow the multiple sea areas tenders. And for that situation, we should limit the capacity, the maximum capacity. That would be a limit of the auction. Well, in the beginning of this offshore wind, we probably need this kind of scheme in order to create multiple pipelines of the supply chains. We would like to set the capacity to a certain limit so that we can create more of the project. However, we do not want to disconnect the supply chains or create the inefficient supply chains. So that's our potential concern. So if we are to provide some kind of limit, we need to ensure the volume of the project as well. Probably 1 gigawatt should be allowed. Maybe we should offer the tenders by 1 gigabit watt an hour basis. So that's the first stage. So this is our current state of the pipeline creations. Areas that we had made the public tenders are highlighted in red, and those areas have already been finalized. Orange areas are the promising zones, and at local municipalities, we are conducting some consultations and trying to promote them to the promotion zones. So when they are promoted to the promotion zone, they will be under the auction. So we would like to promote those orange areas. And they are very much interested in, the green area are the ones that are interested in this offshore wind, especially in Hokkaido, Tohoku, and Kyushu areas. We see those zones coming up. And not only those areas, but we'd like to create more of the pipelines going forward. That would be our continuous effort going forward. And every year during summer period, we scrutinize new potential zones. And this summer, we will update this map as well. This page explains the central system, the Japanese version of the centralized model. Each zone's researches are done in order to select the zones, and we offer the information to be utilized for the public tender. However, such data, submission timing, or details are not sufficient yet. Therefore, each operators have to run their own researches. That is our current state. And in overseas, in order to promote the offshore wind, these countries are saying that rather than having the redundant researches done by operators, the central government should run the research and provide the necessary information that should be more efficient. That kind of debate is done. So we in Japan are thinking about introducing this system. Specifically speaking, what kind of specifications of the research specification should be adequate would be demonstrated in 3 EC areas in 2022, and from 2023, JobNext will be outsourced to run these surveys, which are governed by the central government, to survey on the wind conditions and so forth. And based on this data, from 2025, we will run the public tender based on the data offered by the central government. This is my last slide. This is the floating offshore winds activities. The central government has a Green Innovation Fund, especially when we have the large and inexpensive project. We are favoring to offer this fund, and we have 2 phases, 1 and 2. In phase 1, for floating offshore wind, we are developing this cables or braid and so forth. So we are developing this element of the offshore wind. And in phase 2, we will demonstrate the floating system, the large-scale ones, which are we will leverage the demonstration with the phase 1, so that we will be able to apply that to the large-scale commercial project. And we would like to leverage those phase 2 demonstrations for the future commercial projects. So briefly, I had explained the current state of the policy around the Japanese offshore wind. Thank you very much for your attention.
はい、武藤さんどうもありがとうございました。そうしましたら、若干
Mr. Muto, thank you very much. So we have time to accept your question. So Mr. Ueda, we have received some Q&As from the audience, but could you ask questions based on their input as well? So we do have the question from the participants. So for the tender in December, we had already seen the outcome, but cost information, could you give more information around the cost evaluations? Because of the future tenders, probably you are not able to disclose the details. Is that the case? Well, thank you very much for your question. Everybody, of course, if you are in the business field, the cost structure of the bidding are the source of the competition from the operator's standpoint. Therefore, it is difficult for us to disclose the details. However, in terms of the outline or guideline of the bidding or tender, at the timing that we certify, we will disclose the details. So we wanted the operators to wait to give us such bidding information. At the time of the selection, we would like to offer as much information as possible so that the interest of the citizens or local people's acceptance can be obtained, or maybe supply chain planning and so forth. Those are highly related to the local operations or local people. So by providing the information at early stage, we will be able to improve the security or sense of security of the local people. So for the business details, we would like to offer information at early stage. That is something we are currently debating. Thank you very much. So the question, this question relates to April European Wind Power Convention. And when we visited the Bilbao, and Asia Pacific person in charge at the European Wind Power, there was some request. According to his request, there are 3 improvement areas that he raised for Japanese wind power generation. First is predictability, because at the moment, Japanese wind power itself, it's rather difficult to predict, even having the auction participation, and then they tried to participate in the bidding, but they were not able to have a good predictivity at the moment. So hopefully, the Japanese government will move to the centralized model at the early stage, so that they will be able to have a good, understanding of the investment. Unless we have the kind of visibility, they are not able to be motivated in participating. The second request is that the scale or the size of the project. Japanese wind power, the scale is now expanding. And the 4 gigawatt or 8 gigawatt, and sometimes the 10 gigawatt, that is the kind of capacity. That's the European market. However, in Japan, 350 megawatts and so forth equals to in one project. Then 350 or 5
100 megawatt, then the manufacturers of the wind turbine itself thinks it's too small. For the 1 gigawatts, it's more of a standard per project. So why don't you, Japan project should expand its scales at least 1 gigawatt per project. That's the request. And hopefully, the third request is that in Japan, after winning the auction, and until the construction begins, it requires 5 years or 8 years. However, wind power business itself is a very, very quick in terms of the change of the generation. Then at the time of the bidding process, the product at the time of the auction will be possibly discontinued when the project actually construction will begin. So we appreciate, or he said that they appreciate if the government of Japan accepts the model change at the time of the from the auction to the actual implementation of the project or the construction on a flexible manner. Do you have any kind of response to that? Okay, very briefly, I would like to answer. The first question is that the predictability, as was requested, yes, the Japanese government is planning to adopt the centralized model going forward. Other than that, for this renewable energy, the use of the offshore area for the renewable energy that was enacted just now. So in 5 years from now, we would like to adopt the direction going forward. So first of all, this centralized model must be established on a concrete manner. So the second is that the scale requirement, right, per sea area, 350 megawatts or 500 megawatts, instead of such small scale, we would like to have the much bigger in capacity per project. And how we can ensure that has to be considered. And looking at the global trend, we need to create a more attractive Japanese market for the offshore wind. To do this, we need to look at the timing of the revision of the law as well as the preparation for the such a stage. Now, number 3, there are 2 answers. 2 things that I can say. So at least 5 or 8 years necessary after the auction ended and until the complete start of the construction. So they need to get the wind farm certifications or the safety requirements, certifications, and so forth. That kind of period is necessary. As long as the plan meets the requirement at the time of the auction, I believe it is feasible. We can be flexible in terms of the replacement of the model. However, in terms of the safety requirement and the verification process of the safety and the wind turbine switching itself might be rather difficult because of the safety requirement. But of course, we would like to share the information, but of course, we are not too rigid that saying everything no, unless unless the content of the auction would be met. But we don't say that. But in terms of the cost and other type of project or the plan details, if there are some improvement, then we'll be able to accept. If there is some kind of downward trend, then we were not able to accept.
Mr. Muta, thank you very much for participating despite your busy schedule. Now moving on to the next speaker. So from AEE, Technical Director, Mr. Thomas Romagosa is the speaker. Mr. Romagosa, over to you.
Hello, good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon there in Japan. Hello to all our Japanese colleagues from Spain. and thanks for inviting us to participate in this webinar. I'm going to share my screen. Can you confirm me if you can see it okay?
Mr. Lumagosa, sorry,
Yes.
interrupt you. I can hear your breath sound, your breathing. Yeah,
You
like
cannot
this.
hear?
Yes, we can hear. So that's why please move your microphone up a little bit up.
Can you hear me now better?
Yeah, it's better. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Please go ahead.
Can you see my screen? Can you see the screen, please?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'm going to give you an overview, a quick overview of what is the situation right now in Spain concerning offshore wind and what are the plans for offshore wind deployment for the following years. Well, first of all, I am coming from the Spanish Wind Energy Association. We are the association that represents all the wind energy sector in Spain. We have all the value chain, all kinds of companies in our Spanish wind sector, considering developers, manufacturers, and all kinds of companies of all the value chain. And now we represent more than 280 members. The offshore wind targets for Spain come up from the European strategies, from the European Union strategies. And
Mr. Lumagosa, please.
yes.
Yes, can you hear me? I'm so sorry to interrupt you again. Your voice is a little bit lower, so that's why interpreter it's hard to hear your voice. So a little bit speak louder.
Okay, it's better now.
Oh yes. Oh yeah, it's better now.
It's better now. I have changed my microphone, and I hope
okay.
it works better now.
Yes, it's better now. Thank you so much for your cooperation.
Okay, so sorry for these technical problems.
No problem.
Okay, well, I was saying that the offshore wind targets in Spain and in general all the energy policies come from the European Union strategies in some way, and the European Union has fixed some specific wind targets for 2030 of having 60 gigawatts of offshore wind, and for 2050 300 gigawatts. These were the targets that were specified in the offshore renewable energy strategy that was published 2 years ago. And now with some additional plans, these targets have even increased. So that is the main framework that we have in all European countries. But then each specific country has the independent targets that we will see now later what do they apply in Spain. As a general overview of the technology evolution in Spain, as you will probably know, we still don't have any commercial offshore wind farms. We hope that the next year we have the first auction, offshore wind auction, but still we don't have any commercial offshore wind farm still connected. But in other countries of Europe, the development of offshore wind comes from more than 10 years ago, and there are already a good number of megawatts installed and of wind farms, and we have interesting auction prices lower than 50 euros megawatt hour. So we already have some merchant or almost merchant projects of bottom fixed technology. Considering floating wind, which is the technology that will be applied to Spain because we have very high depths, we have a very short continental platform, and so in Spain we will sure go for floating wind. The costs are higher, but we expect a cost reduction steeper, even steeper than bottom fix. Now, well, the strike price for the France offshore wind tender was around 120 euros megawatt hour, but probably the project will go down below that strike price and even below 100 or 80 euros megawatt hour. What is the situation in Spain? Well, you can see here in these maps, in the left one, that the depths of the sea, they are very high depths. So we must go for floating that is a different situation from the most countries of Europe. But we have very good wind spots in some parts of our coasts. For example, in the north of Spain, we have very good wind speed sites, and also in the south of Spain, and also in the Canary Islands, there are very good sites for offshore wind development. So we have good conditions. Also in the north east of Spain, near France, there is also some good spots for offshore wind farms. What is the situation of the regulatory framework right now? Well, that is one of the main problems that is blocking the offshore wind development right now, because we don't have all the regulatory pieces ready and approved. We have some of them. For example, we have a general auction design framework, which has been used for onshore projects and for solar PV projects since November of 2020, so that this is already approved. And also we have a Spanish offshore wind energy roadmap, which was published on December of last year, but still we have pending the approval of the maritime spatial planning, and also the regulation of the permitting process specific for offshore wind farm. We have permitting process for all onshore technologies, but offshore wind farms have some particularities that have to be modified, and this is also pending to be done. So now the government has closed the possibility of presenting new proposals for offshore wind projects until all this regulation is finally approved. What our government has in its plans is that by the end of this year, by the fourth quarter of 2022, we will have all this pending regulation finished. And so probably the first tender will be announced by the end of this year or at the beginning of 2023. That is the ideal situation right now, that the first tender can be held in the first quarter of 2023. So now some specific messages that we already know and that come in the offshore wind energy roadmap that was published at December of 2021. In Spain, we have specific objectives for offshore wind that goes from 1 to 3 gigawatts to 2030. We already have a tender framework proposed, but not approved yet, as I was saying. Also, it is proposed that the initial deployment, that probably the first auction will take place in the Canary Islands. As we saw before, there are good places there with high speed winds over 9-10 meters per second. So there are good sites there for the initial deployment of the Canary Islands. And also there are already some coordination established between the offshore wind deployment and the grid connection planning, which is also a different planning procedure that is done in Spain in parallel to all energy developments. And also this offshore wind energy roadmap establishes a good coordination between both planning procedures. And also offshore wind has been taken into account inside the recovery funds that the European Union has placed or has given to most countries in Europe to be able to cope with the COVID crisis or the post-COVID crisis. And offshore wind is one of the main activities that can be funded with these recovery funds. But there are some still, we are still lacking some important things for offshore wind development.
こ
For
の開発
example,
においてはまだ
we don't have an auction calendar yet. We expect to have the first auction on the first quarter of 2023, but we don't have an auction calendar for the mid-term or long-term. So this does not give a good visibility for the industry and developers. We also don't have long-term targets in Spain. We have a long-term target in Europe, for all Europe, towards 2050, but not for Spain. And also we still have not approved some regulatory pieces of this important framework. So these are things that have to be fixed along this year by our government. Another characteristic of the Spanish market is that we already are a very important industrial hub for offshore wind, because we have all the value chain that is needed to build up and to design an offshore wind farm. We have a very strong wind industry, onshore wind, with powerful wind turbine manufacturers in Spain. We also have a very powerful port and harbor network, and also we have a very powerful network of shipyards that are already exporting bottom fixed and floating structures to other European wind farms, mostly in the North Sea. So we have all the value chain represented in our country. That is an advantage for the development of offshore wind farms when the local market starts. As you can see in this slide, these are the main industrial facilities that are related with wind, with the wind industry in Europe. And we see two main hubs. One is composed of countries like Germany, Denmark, Holland, and Belgium, mostly, and Spain is, together with Portugal, another very powerful industrial hub. We have more than 250 manufacturing facilities related with the wind industry in Spain. And in fact, from the 13 projects that have already been built for floating wind all over the world, 11 of them have had the participation, the direct participation of Spanish companies. An important characteristic for the industry is that since April of this year, the European Union already accepts to include in the energy auctions some criteria different from the price of the energy. So now in the auctions, our governments can include up until 30% of different criteria related to local content, to employment rate generation, economical development, and industrial local content. So up until 30%, and this will be probably used by the Spanish government in these offshore wind farms. Still, the specific criteria are not defined, but this is already allowed and will be probably used by our government for the first offshore wind auction. Another characteristic of our market is that we are also a powerful innovation hub for two reasons. The first one is that we have a specific testing facilities and research and development infrastructure network. It is called MARGIS. It is a very powerful network composed by different testing facilities and innovation centers and technological centers interconnected together, and each one specialized in different areas. But a company that wants to develop a new floating structure, for example, has in Spain a very good ecosystem of technological centers, laboratories, and testing facilities to do so. In fact, we have 2 testing sites. One is called BIMEP in the north of Spain, in the Basque Country, and the other is Plocan in the Canary Islands, where demonstrator projects and prototypes can be tested in real conditions. And this makes also a good ecosystem for research and development in offshore wind, apart from all the commercial opportunities that there are for big offshore wind farms. And the second reason for being an innovation hub, well, here you have some more details about Plocan and BIMEP, these testing facilities, the characteristics, the surface that is available in each one of them. Now we will have, after the presentation from SciTech and from Plocan, so they will better explain these facilities. But the second reason for being a big innovation hub is that we also have a lot of companies that are developing different solutions for floating structures to be able to decrease the cost of this technology. And from nowadays, from more than the 50 floating solutions that are identified at global level, 14 of them correspond to Spanish patents made up by the participation of Spanish companies. And these are active solutions that are being developed in different TRL levels, but trying to achieve a commercial level. So that is also a good characteristic of the Spanish market, that you can find powerful companies already with good technology development. The Spanish roadmap, in fact, identifies the support to R&D activities as one of the priorities. And with these recovery funds that comes from Europe for this to be able to improve our conditions after the post-COVID crisis, in fact, our government is going to use 200 million euros to support marine energies technologies and funding R&D projects and the demonstration of prototypes, and the reinforcement and the development of new testing facilities. These funding lines will be published during the second semester of this year. So this is also a good opportunity for funding demonstration projects that will come in the following months. Going a little bit deeper into the regulatory issues, we are still pending to approve the maritime spatial plans, but we already have a draft that has been analyzed and have been in public consultation already. And in these drafts, we can see that there is already 8,000 square kilometers reserved for offshore wind. It represents less than 0.7% of all the Spanish waters. So it's a small portion of all the Spanish waters. So the impact to other activities is not so big in terms of total surface. But still, the compatibility with other activities is something that has to be better analyzed, because there is a strong opposition from some sectors such as fisheries and tourism. So this is something that it has to be dealt with, and we will enter later on in other slides. Important messages of this maritime spatial planning criteria. Well, we have already commented that we have high depths, so we must go to floatant solutions. We have good resource areas with sites that have wind speeds over 9 meters per second. The MSPs already considerate all the environmental protected areas, so all sensible areas are avoided. So the permitting of the projects will be easier in theory, because no environmental delicate areas are being used, and also other activities have also been taken into account to assure a good coexistence between defense activities, fishing, aquaculture, also maritime traffic, and research and development activities. However, although they have been taken into account in these maritime spatial plans, there are still some problems in some specific areas that have to be better analyzed when the specific projects will start to be developed. How are the projects going to be developed? Well, this is something that it is not still written on paper because the regulation is not still approved, but we already have some hints from the offshore wind roadmap. And so we can see that probably the tenders will have a model similar to the hybrid tenders that have been followed in other countries.
Mr. Romagosa, sorry, you have 1 minute left.
Okay, perfect. For example, well, there are the model of a decentralized tender, totally decentralized, where all the bidders can place their proposal in any part of the sea. That is a model, for example, that is followed in the UK. Opposite to this decentralized model, there is the centralized tender where the government specifically defines all the area, the detailed area with all the coordinates of the site that has to be bid by all bidders. So all bidders have to place an offer for this same area. And the model that is going to be used in Spain is a mixture of these two. It's going to be a hybrid tender where the government specifies a big area designated in the maritime spatial plans, and bidders can place their proposals inside this area, but with the liberty of proposing different projects inside them. So if we go to this other slide, we see that in this big area, in this example, 3 developers have presented projects, but only one of them is going to win because it's the most cost effective and it follows the criteria of the auction better than the rest. So this probably will be the model used in Spain, and to the winner of the developer that wins the bidding process, he will be awarded with a long-term contract for the energy produced, probably CFDs contract for difference. He also will be awarded with the leasing of the maritime area where the project will be located, and he also will be awarded with the grid connection permit to be able to evacuate all the energy generated. Very quickly, some important messages. We have in Spain a strong opposition from the fishing sector. You can see here some examples of news that have appeared recently in different media in Spain of fishing cooperatives requesting that offshore wind is not developed in Spain. Some examples of them. However, there are already analyses and scientific tests that can justify that offshore wind farms have a very positive effect on fisheries because they have a reserve effect. So inside the offshore wind farm, you cannot fish or only some specific fishing arts, but in the nearby areas, because of this reserve effect, the fishing captures are increased. So offshore wind farms have a positive effect in general for fisheries. This is something that is now strongly being debated in Spain, and the opposition is mainly focused on some specific points, and it can be dealt with correctly. And also, some other examples of misunderstanding of the offshore wind development that causes the public opinion to go against offshore wind is that sometimes administration of public bodies or the government does not explain how projects will be developed. And in the Canary Islands, for example, there have already been published in the newspapers 16 projects accounting for 1,500 megawatts, but all these projects are competing for the same site from the same geographical area, which is a small area that can only fit 300 megawatts. So only 300 megawatts will be really installed in these areas because all the existing projects will be competing in an auction between them. So not 1,500 megawatts will be awarded, only 300, but the public opinion does not understand it, and they think that all the coast will be full with wind turbines, accounting for a total of 1,500 megawatts. So it is very important for all the public bodies, administrations, governments to do a dissemination campaign and to explain how offshore wind will be really developed so that the public opinion and the different sectors understand it correctly. And well, that is all from my part. Thank you very much for your attention, and I am available for any questions if you consider it.
はい、トーマスさん、どうもありがとうございました。そうしましたら、
Thank you very much for your presentation. Now, we would like to, Ueda-san would like to raise a few questions. So, in Spain, same as in Japan, there are shallow waters, not so shallow enough, same as Japan. So, because the depth is so deep, so that's why you would like to focus on the floating style. Is this correct?
Yes, that is correct. There are some shallow waters, but very near the coast. So these projects that will allow bottom fixed technology, they are so near the coast that the environmental impact and the visual impact is very high and will be very difficult to develop. So all areas considered in the maritime spatial plans are further away from the coast and are higher than 100 meters depth. So they need to go for floating.
はい。浮体式はまだコストが高いです。で、このコストを下げる際に、浮体の工夫だけでは限界があると思います。
The floating is quite costly. So in order to reduce the cost, I think it is quite difficult under current design. So maybe use the two blades. I think we need to be very creative in order to reduce the cost effectively. But based on Japanese experience, that creative wind turbine to be used for the floating, that will limit the availability of the windmill and doesn't prove the economical viability. We had experienced such failure. So how are you going to get this kind of a break even for this cost reduction effort and the economical viability?
Okay, from all the areas for floating wind that are identified in the maritime spatial plans, there are some very good areas that have very good wind resource over 9-10 meters per second of wind speed, and also they have they are at good depths between 100 and 200 meters depth, and also quite near the coast. So the LCOE or the cost of the wind farms will not be so high. And well, the financing structure or the auction conditions that are planned by the government is to use CFDs contract for differences, where the government applies a fixed tariff to the winners of the auction for the wind farm for over 20 years, or at least 20 years. So with these CFDs, that well, the strike price will be probably below 80 euros megawatt hour, and there will be probably some surprises with even lower costs. Still, it is not so competitive as other technologies, but it is not already so high. And in fact, now with the conditions that we have of the electricity markets all over Europe with very high prices, over 100 and 200 euros per megawatt hour, the costs of floating are already more competitive than that. So the first projects will already be below 100 euros per megawatt hour, and with the experience curve, this will be shortened very quickly. That is what it is expected.
Thank you very much. In Spain, wind condition is quite good, as you say, and the capacity of the facility is good enough, and you may have a good economic viability. That's why you don't need to adapt to aggressive type of the wind design and so forth, or blade design. Is that correct?
Well, with the technologies already available, commercial floating wind farms are already feasible, but this does not mean that technology has to advance. And as I was showing in the slide of the innovative solutions that are being designed, well, there are a lot of companies working on different models and different designs to try to achieve less expensive costs and to reduce the energy cost of floating wind. So both things can work in parallel. The first commercial wind farms can already be installed at reasonable prices, but the technology has also to continue the evolution and to try to find more optimized solutions.
Thank you very much.
Thomas,
Thomas, thank you very much for your detailed explanation. So let us move on to the next presentation by Mr. Ueda, Director General of the Japan Wind Power Association. Mr. Ueda, when you're ready, please start.
My name is Yoshinori Ueda from Japan Wind Power Association. I would like to cover the topic of the offshore wind power development in Japan. This presentation is dedicated for the overseas viewers. And you can see the picture of the Kitakyushu in Fukuoka Prefecture. There is a 3 megawatts two-bladed turbine on a moon pool barge type floater. So I would like to talk about three things. Number one is the current status, current auction status at the port and general sea area and future government of Japan-led auction. Number two, raising up the domestic supply chain. And number three is a floating offshore wind power in Japan. Back in 2020, then Prime Minister Suga declared that the carbon neutrality by 2050, and to achieve that, the offshore wind project was announced. And that's the starting point of this good momentum. And I would like to skip a few pages, as you may know already, and some new information. By 2030, 10 gigawatts. That was the declared target by the government, but this is on the approval basis. Because here in Japan, approval and licensing itself takes a lot of the time. Therefore, in terms of the operation of 10 gigawatts by 2030, I don't think it will be ready by then. So actual operation would be 5.7 gigawatts by 2030. That is the current assumption, 5.7 gigawatts. And as you can see, this is the Japanese sixth energy master plan. And 2030, 5.7 gigawatts by 2030, as you can see. So the difference of the 10 gigawatts and the 5.7 gigawatts, this is difference from the definition. Whether it is operational basis or the licensing basis. So there is this is compatible. So this is the same meaning. And in terms of 10 gigawatts by 2030 and 5.7 gigawatts by 2030. And then this is the laws and tariffs at the offshore wind power in Japan. In the Japanese sea area, this is the EEZ, exclusive economic zone versus the territorial sea, because the Japanese sea is mostly a depth of the very deep sea. In the EEZ, almost more low, deeper than 100 meter. So in terms of the fixed bottom offshore wind, it is impossible for this 100-meter depth. Therefore, it's not put on the back burner. Therefore, right now, basically what we are talking about the offshore wind power is that the territorial sea. And this territorial sea is divided into two pieces. One is a port sea area, and another one is a general sea area. And first, the port sea area by 2030, that was the original target. But the sea area, the 2016, there was a law change for the harbor and port law. And the prefectural government is the organizer of the auction. That's begun back then. And later, by 20 years is now extended to 30 years for the occupational periods. By having that, 3 to 4 years later, for the general sea area, again, the occupation year of 30 years, this new law is now enacted. And for the prefectural governments will designate the area, and then the central government will accept or agree. And then the central government will be the organizer of the auction. And in terms of the price or tariff, 36 Japanese yen kilowatt hour, that was the very attractive price. That was a FIT or feed-in tariff, but it's it's not the feasible actually. So this for the floating, therefore 36 yen is now adopted for the fixed bottom. And now it is moving into the auction period. So this, you can see this is the port sea area. There are some marks plotted in the map. So Ishikari, Shinko in Hokkaido, and Mutsu, Ogasawara, and Akita Port, and the Kashima Port, and also the Hibikinada and the Kyushu Port. And then in that order, there is the auction in progress. And right now, Akita and Noshiro ports, the construction has already finalized almost. To winter this year, the start of operation is expected. And next is Ishikari and Ishikari, Shinko, and Hibikinada. The construction now begins, so we will be able to see operations in a few years from now. Now, this is the picture of the Akita port and the Shiro port construction site. And in Akita, November this year, our JWPA association, together with the GWEC, hold a second GOWS Japan, the conference. So that will be scheduled November 9th to 10th. I hope you will be able to participate in this event. And in Kitakyushu, there will be a wind power Hibiki project going on. And the difference from the Akita project and this in Kitakyushu, the difference of the capacity of the wind power, because in Akita, it was 4.2 gigawatt only. However, for Kitakyushu, we need to pursue more economic viability, so needed to have a more power generation. So 9.5 megawatts, so that is a more than double capacity is required. That is the project for Kita-Kyushu. So this is the current bidding process. And for the general sea area, a common sea area, there are 2 steps. And the first step is that the selection of the promotion area or sea area, having the understanding of the local residents and the municipalities or prefecture government will raise hands, and then the central government will appoint. And then for that designated area, the central government will define or having the auction to select the operator or developer. So this is the normally the 2-step approach with the 2 years. And then total of 23 sea areas are under nomination by the municipalities, and then of which 4 areas were already auctioned. And in the upcoming areas, they are now working on the way of the auction process. And in terms of the round 1, the auction results at a glance.
At the top, you see Goto. This is a floating, and at the price of the 36 Japanese yen kilowatt hour, this is the feed-in price for this project, which is done by Toda. Akita and Yorihonjo and Choshi in Chiba Prefecture are the remaining 3 projects. Total of approximately 1.7 million megawatt per hour, and Mitsubishi and CTEC Consortium have won these 3 projects. And surprisingly, the price, well, actually 29 JPY per kilowatt per hour was the upper limit designated by METI. But Yorihonjo, you see 11.99 Japanese yen per kilowatt hour. It's so inexpensive. In a sense, it is really epoch making. When we started the offshore wind in Japan, those people against the renewable energy, they said that the cost was too high and offshore wind power was not usable. But their assumption was, well, they distracted because they saw the price went down to approximately the same as the thermal power, which is 12 yen per kilowatt hour. So this is really a book-making outcome, because those anti-renewable energies advocation was kind of ceased. And Mitsubishi and CTEC had won the 3 projects. There are some conflicts here as well within Japan, because the timing of the operation was quite late, like 2026. Well, majority of people believe that the start time to be 2026. However, their plan was 2028 or 2030. So slow. So 10 gigawatts by 2030 would not be achieved with this schedule. As the schedule gets later, the supply chain education or enlightenment would not be happening. The acceleration cannot be happening. So there are some opinions that we should review this method. And JWPA had put together the opinions, and we made the proposal to the government in February. And in March, Japanese government said that they will review the evaluation method, and they had suspended the round 2 auction. And then they had held 4 knowledgeable persons meetings, and the scale requirement or start timing, and so forth are being reviewed. Probably sometime this week, public comment will be announced, and based on that public comment, the new auction system will be determined, and then the round 2 auction will be started. That will be a schedule in Japan. Lastly, this is a central method, centralized method. The limitation here is that the zones that has never been used can only have this methodology. So in new sea areas are only suitable for this auction method. Therefore, we only have 3 projects: Hokkaido Ganyu and Iwate, Hironocho. Those are the floating. And the other, Sakata City in Yamagata, those are the 3 projects potentially using the centralized auction model. Next is about the supply chain. In Japan, in 2022, December the 15th, they announced that the 60% should be covered by local contents. Windmill supply chains had been established by Mitsubishi and so forth, and there are some component manufacturers in Japan, and those construction companies or logistics companies are tying up with the strong foreign companies and getting into either Japanese or global offshore wind developments. So these are the partnerships which are done between Japanese and foreign companies, which are covered by media. And 2, the red highlighted ones or the dotted ones is Toshiba and Kashima's collaboration with either GE or Fan-Code. The reason why they need to tie up with Japanese partner is because we have a unique regulation requirements, local regulations and standard. So unique, therefore, the Japanese company with the foreign proven companies combination would be successful in Japan. And in round 1 auction, it looked as though the only Japanese companies won this auction. However, behind the scene, the key factor was the combination with the overseas company. Mitsubishi actually had acquired Eneco, and they have the know-how from that company. And when we look at below tier 2, Mitsubishi is using the GE's Harrier X wind turbines, which is manufactured by Toshiba in Yokohama factory. And Kashima also won the offshore project, but they are partnering with Fan-Code for the construction. So the proven foreign company and Japanese companies partnership is one of the kind of a major stream or mainstream to win the Japanese auction. JFE and Nitetsu are speaking about their monopile foundation building, and also there are some other media coverages, and Vestas is also saying that they will improve the supply chain in Japan. So there are some concepts to build the hubs in Japan around this wind farm. And also for floating offshore, Toda have won the round 1 bid at Goto in Nagasaki Prefecture. And Hitachi's 2.1 megawatts of 80 units have been purchased, and they will start the construction soon. However, this is the only commercial project that we see now. Maybe Iwate's one has a specific schedule, but the others are not clear yet. The reason why the floating project is so slow in Japan is because we don't have that environment ready. The floating is quite expensive right now, but also there is no target or roadmap specific for this floating offshore wind. And also at EEZ, if we want to do the floating, there is no role for us to occupy that area. And also there is no agreement between the fishermen. And also there is no factory or port preparations, how to kind of deliver the elements and so forth. So in order to solve these issues or overcome those problems, the floating offshore wind developments working group will be organized. That was one of the things that they are working on publicly and privately, public-private association. And that team will try to solve those issues one by one.
And earlier, Muto-san says that the Green Fund, and with this, leveraging this Green Innovation Fund, and we'll be able to understand the arrangement and how to attract and so forth. And that's the current overview of the Japanese, the offshore power. And finally, this is the JWPA's announcement. Here at our association is the industry-wise association, more than 500 member companies of the wind power, and 85% or more of the wind power generated in Japan is covered. So a variety of companies are embedded, are our group members. And there are some good, vision, and I would like to have the good, consultation and support going forward. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much.
Mr. Ueda, you went to Bilbao, Spain, Wind Europe convention. Could you share your impression of that convention, expo? Also, you participated in the visits as well. Well, Spain is getting back to the wind farm or wind power. That's my impression. It is the second convention held in Spain. Previous one was held in Barcelona when Spain moved away from FIT system. And the wind farm or wind generation was out of discussion in Spain because of that elimination of FIT. But now in Spain, they are coming back to wind power generation. I felt the passion. That was quite moving to me. And that will be announced later, but DemoFest, Shokan, R&D, I announced continuously, so I saw the momentum as well. Thank you very much. Now mission on to the next speaker. We would like to invite Ocean Renewable Energy Department of Toda Construction, Mr. Sato. Mr. Sato, over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Sato. Going to share my screen.
Now,
I would like to talk about the globalization of floating wind. Earlier, Mr. Ueda explains that Toda's initiative, and the first in the world, Toda became the winner of this auction of the floating offshore wind power project. We are now entering into the construction of this wind farm. So I would like to touch on that details. So this is the agenda. First of all, I want to talk about the potential of the floating wind. And I would like to also introduce the hybrid spar, which was introduced by us. And finally, I want to talk about the initiatives as a global player. First of all, the potential of the offshore floating wind. So according to the IEA, the potential of the offshore wind power for the fixed bottom type to be adapted for lower than the 60-meter depth is 87,000 terawatt-hour per annum. On the other hand, floating type has the potential of 333,800 terawatt-hour. So as you can see, this is quite a large and sizable potential for the floating. So IEA released the carbon neutrality for 2050. They have the carbon neutrality roadmap, and this potential of the floating is more than a double of the annual energy capacity around the globe, which means if we can cashing on this floating wind power, it is feasible to cover across the annual energy consumption or capacity around the globe. And this February this year, ScotWind Round 1 auction, and the floating 15 gigawatts operator was auctioned and defined. And this year, we expect to see the start of the auction of the floating in California, US. Other than Scotland, UK, other than Scotland, Korea and Ireland, as well as Spanish market is now opening up for this floating. And by 2031, we expect, or GWEC expects, that the annual introduction capacity would be 10 gigawatts per annum. As such, the floating offshore wind market is expected to grow largely in a global arena. I would like to touch on the initiatives taken by Toda Corporation. So we developed the structure called hybrid spar floating system. Why do we call it as hybrid spar? Because this is the vertically very lengthy, the spar. And as you can see, the upper part, yellow part, is made of steel. And the bottom part, the gray colored, this is a concrete part. Why did we select the spar type model? There are two reasons. One is the ability of mass production, and another one is the stability. Because the spar, compared to other structure type, as you see, the structure itself is very simple, so it's very suitable or friendly to mass production. And also, the center of gravity will be lowered from the center of the buoyant. It is very stable. Even if we flipped out, it will be returned to the normal direction. So it is very, very stable. So the floating structure to be used for the wind power generation, there are so many affected force. But at the sea surface, there are so many waves, so there will be a very strong bending force to be applied on the floating system. But on the other hand, the spar type, when the deep water where the spar would be introduced, there will be a very strong water pressure will be imposed. Therefore, areas with the bending force, we adopted the steel, which is very resilient against such a bending force. And also, for the very big, water pressure is imposed at the deep water, we use the concrete, which is very resilient against such a water pressure, as well as the very economically viable. And here is a picture and the history of the hybrid spar project. The development began in 2007. Actually, it's more than 10 years ago. And we started the 1 out of 100 scale model using indoor pool. In the university lab, indoor pool, we began this scale model testing. And then every year, we try to increase the scale every year, and then taking step-by-step approach to improve the design technology. And in 2013, as the Ministry of Environment, we were awarded the demonstration project to install the 2 megawatt floating wind turbine in Oto Island of Nagasaki. And in 2016, for the private sector, commercial operations began as a private sector, and then this has already been stable operations in the 9th year since then. So I would like to show you the video. So the boat is on the camera on the boat itself is moving. So it might be really difficult, but as you see, the wind turbine itself is very stable. And based on this good track record, Toda company, as well as the other 5 companies, created the consortium. And June last year, we participated in the auction and we were awarded. As you see, based on the new law for the Offshore Use Act for offshore wind project, this is the first in kind of the floating offshore wind turbine. And Muto-san of the Renewable Energy Agency, so he said it was round 1. So I think it's fair to say this award for us was at round 0, and first around the world we were awarded for this project. And then this is the final design of the project. And as you see, we've been operating in the past 10 years. So we encountered variety of typhoon in various size. In 2018, in July, there was a big scale typhoon approaches our wind farm and wind turbine. So you can see the picture now or video now. In the left-hand camera, as you can see, something is moving. This is the blade. So it is generating power. And then that velocity was 22.4 meter per second in average. And then the wind height, wave height was 5 meter in the direction, and the maximum is 7 to 8 meter. And it was 1988 kilowatts. And you can see the picture in 6 a.m. And then next time, you can see the picture or video at the 11 a.m. on the same date. And that wind speed was 52.2 meters per second. And then we stopped, of course, the power generation during that typhoon. And that significant wave height was 7 meters. And the maximum was over 10 meters. So I forgot to mention earlier, but the 5 kilo away from the coast, and then whenever the typhoon approaches, there is no visibility from the port or coast. So there is one wind turbine only. So all we can have the visibility is the camera attached on this floating offshore wind power turbine. So this is the camera attached on that turbine. And please take a look at the video at the 52 meters per second.
Left bottom, you see east, west, and you see the wave is moving towards north. This wave is left bottom door camera image. So as you can see, as the surface of the sea, it cannot be visible. So under the typhoon, very strong typhoon, this windmill were able to sustain the stability. So this spar type, how do we want to challenge the global market? Commercialization of the floating has just been started. As Mr. Ueda explained earlier, the Japanese floating's fit price is 36 yen. Meanwhile, fixed bottom cost reduction is progressing. In Europe, well, probably Japan is trying to be a part of that, but the floating wind power would become the cheapest power source of all options. Megawatt hour, $50, 44 euro. That was the number shared earlier. That's a mid-2020s price level, which would be like 6.5 yen to a kilowatt hour. That's the IEA's projection. The reason why the generation cost being so high is because of the size, because of the lack of the scalability and the mass manufacturing capability. So in this 2020s, the large-scale turbine application and mass manufacturing should be materialized. And also because this is the floating, so it can be in deep sea as well, which we are able to expect even greater wind source, so that we will be able to materialize a cost level which is close to the fixed bottom. That's our vision. And in 2030s, the price of the floating offshore wind would become even cheaper than the fixed bottom. And then we are able to materialize this floating wind farm generation would become the mainstream of the wind power source. Annual installation capacity of the offshore wind turbine, which project it will go above 50 gigawatt in 2030, which will be 5 times higher than 2022. Nowadays, the national situation or security is becoming unstable, and energy security or safety will become crucial. So how domestically you are able to sustain the energy or resource the energy is becoming more critical. And thus the floating turbines expectation in Japan is climbing. The reason why we are not able to reduce the cost is because of lack of supply chain and also highly prepared port facilities and the foundation or wind turbine installation ships are short as well. Those are the issues as well. And in order to prepare such facilities, it requires huge investment and also time. In a nutshell, the floating offshore wind power to be penetrated in global market, we need to solve these issues. And at TODA, to solve those problems, we prepare the solution. With that, we were able to win the first global auction. So I would like to explain the details. The production process, manufacturing process, excuse me. Well, what we are thinking about is to allow anywhere and anyone to be able to manufacture. Not preparing the new port, but leverage the existing port facility. Or the thermal plants residuals to be leveraged. And also we are able to leverage the workers at this coal-fired plant as well. Hybrid spar, as mentioned earlier, is very simple design. And we are connecting steel and concrete. Doesn't require the high technology or engineering. Of course, the designing requires a high capability. However, in the manufacturing process, there is no high capability required. And in the process of the manufacturing, as you see at the bottom, it is possible to connect the same structures in multiple times, which means that it is possible to mass manufacture this. So at Goto, we have already started to build the floating offshore wind. And you see here, this is a manufacturing facility called Floating Offshore Wind Hub Goto. This is exclusive to the floating offshore wind. The concrete part, including the cement, we source locally. And for the steel, we use the harness which is close to this location, and they manufacture rings, and we gather them at this location and assemble them. And 10 ton per square meter of the key ground strengths or bearing strengths, and the depth is only 7.5 meter. So not only in Japan, but we'll be able to leverage the similar facilities or similar environment throughout the globe. This is a comparison between Kyushu and the Canary Island in the same scales. Floating offshore wind hub Goto is 100 kilometers away from the main island, which is called Fukue Port, which is a very small local port in Goto city. So as you can see, we are manufacturing on the island, which is very small. So this isolated island in Japan could manufacture this, the hybrid spar. So at Canary Islands, of course, you'll be able to manufacture this. So let me explain, or let me show you the actual manufacturing process. This is actual manufacturing process. The jack-up vessel or large-sized crane are not required. The left top, you see the large crane photo, but this is a photo back in 2012. So we don't use this huge vessel for this hybrid spar. And we are going to load this hybrid spar on the vessel on the left-hand side. What you are looking at is the tower. Yellow part is 15 meters height from the water surface, and this gray part is the floating object. It is steel part, and you see the lighter gray part. This is a concrete part. And there are many pillars and moving or delivering this hybrid spar, and you see many people actually involved in this construction are here to watch this loading site. Some people might say that would you need so many people to carry this, but actually only one person. If we need to drive this cooler, is a one human involved on this. Then we go to offshore and then float this spar in the water. So you have 1 minute left. So you have the vessel and the spar starts to float. And this floating part is floating autonomously. And this is the speed of it takes about 20 minutes to fall or make this spar flow. And then we feed water in this object and let it stand. So this is our concept. AAA. Anyone, anywhere, as required. Very simple design with simple manufacturing process is adopted so that anyone can manufacture this. As you saw, the port facilities didn't require the heavy object support. and could be applied to various sea areas. Lastly, the wind turbines becoming larger nowadays, and various kind of designs are available. But any kind of turbine is applied to this part, like 12 megawatt turbine or 16 megawatt, 20 megawatt. There are multiple design of turbines, but with this part, by changing the length, you are able to adapt to the different conditions. The concrete ring number is the only factor that you need to change to adapt to various kind of turbines. This is a summary. The potential. 10 gigawatts by 2031. And I had explained our hybrid spot and how can we become the global player. That's something also I had explained, and also our cost reduction effort and anywhere as required. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mr. Sato, thank you. And Dr. Sato, thank you very much. Just one question, quick question. So Total Corporation will be entering in the European market. So you are now working on the demonstration project, right, in Europe? So not just Spain, but there are so many viewers, participants today from the Europe as well. So you have any indications on the demonstration project in Europe? Well, as I mentioned, so basically, the installation should be close enough and very good conditions. You'll be able to install that spar type. But we are the companies who are not only involved in the design, but we are the manufacturer of the floating structure and also install as well as operations. We are holistically manage that. So we are able to customize the local requirements and local industry in terms of the design and plan and so forth. Therefore, please, if you do have any vision that you would like to adopt this now hybrid spar in your region, please don't hesitate to contact us. We are happy to help you. Well, thank you very much. Now move on to the next speaker, who is the from Senior David Carrascosa from the SciTech. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting SciTech to this very interesting webinar. It's been a few very interesting presentations so far, and I hope mine is also giving a bit of interesting topics. So I will be sharing my screen. Okay, so that's it. Can you please confirm that you're seeing the screen?
Oh, yes, we can see it, but I know a little bit. We can see the gray. What is this? Maybe you are share your audio and the video.
Yeah, so I've shared my audio and video.
So that's when we can see that maybe the toolbar that is gray outed.
Okay, let's do something.
It is possible to hide the toolbar.
So let me know if
this one
is now okay.
Now, yes, we can also see your Zoom toolbar.
Okay, and then we should. Okay, that's interesting.
I know. It's complicated, right?
So you see the toolbar, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, but
we'll
try to do.
Mind. Yes.
Yes.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
let's do it like that. Okay. SciTech Offshore Technologies is actually a spin-off from SciTech Group. SciTech Group is a multidisciplinary engineering group with global presence and more than 300 people. And we have created this spin-off to focus on floating offshore wind, and that's what I'm focusing on today, on the activity SciTech Offshore is doing in this market. We started soon developing a technology which we are presenting, and we are now present in various markets with different activities. We have prototypes and pilots developed in Spain, but we are also taking part in commercial and pre-commercial projects all over the globe, I would say, from California and down to Australia, including Japan, where we actually have our first subsidiary, SciTech Offshore Japan. Okay. The technology is called the SAF technology, and it's a concrete floater based on two horizontal hulls and a single point mooring, being that the system for the seakeeping, for the mooring. Okay, so the platform can rotate around that point. Some of the key competitive advantages of these technologies are basically the fact that the concrete is very inexpensive, and therefore it makes the whole system very competitive, but it's also providing a great amount of local content, as we are going to demonstrate with the figures in our prototype project. So it does not require very experienced, say, labor for the manufacturing of the platform, and can also be manufactured in ports with no need of dry docks or key, let's say, or very specific shipyards. Okay, so the technology has been developed since, I would say, 2012, where the idea started to develop. So it's been already 10 years, where we have obviously produced some patents. Then we went to tank testing. We did some offshore testing in Santander, small scale, and now we're really focused on our DemoSat project, which is the full scale demonstrator that will go to the sea this summer. Okay, that's a 2 megawatt project, which is the project I'm going to focus on now. But it's not the last thing we have done in floating wind. We are also developing other projects like the Geroa, MedFloat, or Cademo. These are pre-commercial projects that I'm going to speak a bit about at the end of the presentation. And we are already involved in some commercial tenders that are taking place in Europe. But not to go into too much detail on that, I will focus now on the DemoSat project. So the DemoSat project is a project in collaboration between RWE and SciTech. RWE is a leading company in offshore wind. Actually, it's a super big utility coming from Germany. And it's the second company worldwide in terms of offshore wind assets. So very big company and very good companion, very good friend for this DemoSAF project. So RWE is taking a funding role for this project. So it's partially funding the project. SciTech is also funding the project. We also included some public grants to take on the final investment decision in February 2020. And since then, we've been manufacturing the platform, which is a platform that will host and is hosting a 2 megawatt wind turbine. The dimensions of the structure are 30 by 64. The installation will take place in BIMAP, and the water depth in the site will be 85 meters. The mooring system we are using is a hybrid mooring system, combining polyester fiber rope and steel chain. One of the huge milestones of this DemoSAF project is the fact that it will be the first floating offshore wind platform to be connected to the grid in Spain. So also a great milestone for the country. If I go back to BIMAP, BIMAP is the test center that was previously mentioned also by Tomás Romagausa. And this is an existing infrastructure which is 2 miles from shore in the Basque region. It's an infrastructure which has already the electrical cables installed, 4 positions, and the ambition, the objective for that site is actually to host the testing of both wave energy and wind energy marine renewable devices. Okay, the environment in BIMAP is also very harsh. We are designing the platform for a significant wave height of up to 10.5 meters. So that means maximum waves of up to 19 meters. So very harsh environment in terms of waves. And then it's actually a very nice place for a proof of concept. The DemoSAF project is a project where SciTech is taking also an EPC role. So SciTech is managing all the contracts. We've invested more than 80,000 hours of engineering with a team of more than 100 people, and we've engaged with more than 30 companies. That ends up. Yes.
You have 1 minute left, please.
Oh, okay. That's very low time, but well, I would say that it's been a project which has been very, very, very local. Okay, and it has generated more than 75% of its construction budget that's been awarded to local companies. Okay, so if we take a look to what's been happening on the site, we've gone from the precast of the several units, then the assembly of those units to get the final hulls, and then we installed also the mooring, and the platform has been growing until the day of today. I had let's say a couple of videos. As we are running out of time, I'll go for the second video, which is the final launching of the unit. So here you can see the barge we have been using for the installation, let's say for the float off of the unit. Is a barge from BOA, and we have been using these SPMT systems to transfer the whole platform that was fully assembled and manufactured on the deck, so on the quay, and the operation of the launching was very, very successful. everything went as planned. Even if we had some wavy environment, as you can see, the operation was a great success. And just to conclude, my last slide is focused on these pre-commercial opportunities we are developing at the moment. There are two projects in Spain. The Geroa project is in the north. The MedFloat project is in the east of Spain, and at the same time we are also taking part in a project in the US. Okay, so I will conclude my presentation here. It's been a bit short, but obviously if you're interested in knowing more about SciTech Offshore, the technology and the projects we are doing, please feel free to come back to us.
はい、ダビッドさんどうもありがとうございました。
David-san, thank you very much for your presentation. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to contact directly to David. And of course, I can escalate this matter to David later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'd like to invite the last speaker for today from Plocan, Project Manager Alejandro Romero Firguela. Mr. Firguela, over to you.
Good afternoon. Please confirm me if you can see my screen and you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you and we can
okay,
see
perfect.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this is Alejandro Romero. I'm project manager in the Oceanic platform of the Canary Island in Plocan. I will try to focus on the message since I think we are out of time. So we will speak about how we are validating floating solution for deep waters. So once the science has demonstrated the effect of the actual productive system, this has to look for alternatives. In the case of the energy system, we clearly have to look for alternative to the fossil fuels, and in general to all that kind of primary energies that are limited. This is not the case of the wind, for example. This is not the case of the sun or the water. We have found the way to obtain electricity from the wind, and we have a mature technology, but at the same time, we are only taking a poor quantity of the wind resources, because the main resource is offshore. So the offshore wind potential is estimated over 5,000 gigawatts. The offshore wind technology in shallow waters is also mature. But the problem is that the 78% of the offshore wind resources are located in deep waters. And in those areas, the turbine and its platform must flow. There are several layers that boost or block the floating offshore wind projects. Some of those are related to the infrastructure, ports or grids, the supply chain. Also, the regulation and legislation is a key factor for the deployment of new wind farms. But Plocan is working on the first layer that you can see in this slide. So we are focused on the part of research and innovation as a booster of the technological development of the offshore wind industry. At this stage, the barrier is mainly located in the capex and opex of these infrastructures. And we need to have a clear energy, but also cost-effective and robust. Okay, for this purpose, Plocan provides a combination of services to the users of our infrastructure to help them to achieve levels of development close to the market. So, and how we are doing this? Mainly providing a real scenario for the performance of prototypes, which are most of them close to the market. But they need to be validated in a real scenario. Not in the test basin, not in a numerical model, but in real sea conditions. So for this purpose, we have a 23 square kilometers piece of the sea in the island of Gran Canaria, with depths from 0 to 600 meters, where prototypes can be validated in a real scenario by monitoring not only the performance of the prototypes, but also the interaction with the environment. This test site is powered by two 5 megawatts cables in order to export the power generated by the prototypes to the grid, to the grid of the island. And in the middle of that test site, we have an offshore platform as a control tower of all the test site, but also as a smart grid, which integrates the energy from the different prototypes in a smart way, consuming by the platform itself when it's necessary, exporting to the shore, or in a near future transforming this electricity in other energy vectors like hydrogen. The problem is that this infrastructure is not enough for the market, is not enough for the developers, is not enough for the industry and for the researchers. And for these reasons, we have signed a memorandum of understanding with the authority port of Tenerife in order to use the infrastructure for specific prototypes. And another test site in the south of the island of Gran Canaria has been included in the draft of the Maritime and Spatial Planning that has been already mentioned by Tomás in this session. This test site has more wind resources because we have more resources in the south of the island, achieving levels of 10 meters per second. And we will increase the power capacity since our limit in the test site of north of the island is 50 megawatts. So in this test site of the south, we will achieve even 50 megawatts for the deployment of the different prototypes. So right now, among other wave converters, we have a 5 megawatts prototypes powering the grid, which is a concrete telescopic tower, but this is not floating. This is a bottom fix, a gravity-based bottom fix. This one's installed in 2018 and allow us to perform other tests related, for example, with predictive maintenance, with corrective operations, etc. But specifically floating, we are really so excited to have the opportunity to deploy in the coming months. This prototype developed by the Spanish company X1 Wind. This downscale prototype has been constructed in the framework of an European funded project named Pivot Buoy. The prototype is right now waiting in the port of Las Palmas for weather conditions. Since right now we have a lot of winds, a lot of trade winds, which are complicated for the deployment right now. So this is a 1/3 scale, a 1/3 downscale of the final prototype, and it will be in a normal operation at 50 meters of water depth. And how is the concept of this disruptive technology? Well, Pivot Buoy is based on a downwind technology, which allows to the floater to have a passive self-orientation. The floater turns around a single point mooring, which is fixed to the seabed by a tension leg platform. This tension leg platform is pre-installed, and the floating platform connects or disconnects easily. Even the power capacity of this scaled down prototype is only 225 kilowatts. all the elements have been designed to be scaled up to 15 megawatts and saving costs at deep waters even more than 500 meters of depth. In the past, we have already the opportunity of validating all the disruptive concepts, like this wind to power of Aerogenerador, which host even 2 turbines in the same platform, with very good results. So we are realistically comfortable with disruptive concepts. As you can see, we firmly believe that the comfort zone is a barrier for development, and consequently a barrier for the decarbonization, which is our objective, which is our main objective. Following the same commitment, we are also involved in R&D projects far away from the commercial concept, from the market. This is the case of flotante project, which is coordinated by us, which is coordinated by Plocan. This is the development of the conceptual engineering of an hybrid floating platform made of concrete and XPS flown, which is a polymer. But this project has also faced all the challenges related to for example, to the dynamic cables or to the mooring system optimized for deep waters. Very close to the market, these 2 developments, and consequently usable by other different technologies. Let me finish with very good news from yesterday, because it was approved by the Spanish government, the law for sandboxes here in Spain, which is basically a specific framework in terms of permitting and consenting for experimental projects in this type of test, like Plocan. So let me finish this presentation with a very good news. So well, this is all from my side. And well, arigatou gozaimasu. And thank you for your attention. And please contact me if you need further clarifications or more information about our test site, our Plocan. Many thanks.
はい。こちらこそどうもありがとうございました。素晴らしいプレゼンテーションでした。
Thank you very much. Great presentation. We are behind our schedule. Therefore, we'd like to put together the questions to you. We will get back to you. Thank you very much, Armando.
Thanks to you. Thanks for the invitation as well. Thank you.
はい。これをもちまして、本日のウェビナー終了させていただきます。時間がちょっと超過しまして、申し訳ございませんでした。改めて、本日、非常に多くの方々に聴講いただきましたことをお礼申し上げます。どうもありがとうございました。はい。次に、いくつか事務的なご案内がございますので、よろしくお願いいたします。
はい。本日は皆様、お忙しい中、
Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation today. I had already posted on the chat, but today's presentation materials are available on this drive. You are able to download from this link. And TODA materials will be posted later. Please download. And we have a request for you to support us with this survey. URL has already been communicated with you, so please take some time to answer to these questions. Based on this feedback, we will be able to build better webinar, even greater webinar for you. So please do support us. Thank you very much to all the presenters and also to the interpreters. Thank you very much. With this, we'd like to close this event. Thank you very much for your support to the Spanish Embassy.